pictures, photographs of. I guess we are now ready to talk about Brad Armstrong, and a question that was that someone asked right here on the YouTube channel. That is the reason we did this program right on the YouTube channel. His name is Black Bart. Now, I'm not for sure. I don't think it's the Black Bart we all know and love, but his name is Black Bart. He asked this question: what would have motivated Mid-South Wrestling to use Brad Armstrong better? Here's the problem. When they were asking for someone, and we were riding down the road, and Dad asked this question: who could take Magnum T.A.'s place? Magnum T.A. was on his way out. Who could take his place? A couple of people came to mind. Jimmy Golden. We said Jimmy Golden. We said Bob Armstrong. Those were the two people. They called. Dad calls, gets in touch with Jimmy Golden. Jimmy Golden says, I'm not making those trips. I'm sorry. I'm making as much money here. I don't have to make the trips. Bob Armstrong, no. I'm booking. At the time, I think he was booking. And no, I'm not coming there. I'm not going to make the trips. So we thought, well, Brad Armstrong. So we said, listen, call Brad. See if you can get in touch with Brad and see if he'll come in and work. Because we felt like Brad could take the spot of Magnum T.A. Plus, Brad was a whole lot much a better wrestler than Magnum T.A. He was a whole lot better, really, really better on the mic than Magnum T.A. So that was the thought process. Now, did we realize that they were going to have him win the North American heavyweight title, the second TV show? No. You know, if they would have said, we're going to let Brad Armstrong win it. Now, Jack, have you seen how Brad won the title against Ernie Ladd?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that episode.
Where he choked him down? Because, see, that is the way Ernie Ladd choked Magnum T.A. down and won the North American title. So I understood the booking concept. All right, Brad's going to come in. He's going to choke Ernie Ladd down, and the people should be great. They should be happy. Mm-hmm. What they didn't take into account is the wrestling fans thought to themselves. They were mad. We were there at the town. They said, that's Magnum T.A. belt. Brad Armstrong shouldn't have it. Yep. Because they didn't build Brad Armstrong enough. So this is the thing. Magnum T.A. comes into the territory. Ernie Ladd is booking. He takes weeks upon weeks upon weeks to build him up. Finally puts him with Bristol Wrestling #2. That really seals Magnum T.A.'s. Oh, man, Wrestling 2 is taking him under the wing. They do weeks upon weeks of videos of showing them how to do the knee lift and how to wrestle and how to everything. He tells them all this stuff. So they take all this time to get Magnum T.A. over. So why would the people not like Magnum T.A. and not really like Brad? Because they felt like he stole Magnum T.A.'s title. It wasn't Brad Armstrong's fault. It was the promotion's fault and the booking because they didn't think about that. Does that make sense, Jack?
Makes perfect sense. You know, there should have been a hunt for the belt, and you didn't have that. That process alone would have solidified Brad more with the fans, you know, to begin with. You know, let Ernie avoid him. Let him deny him title shots. You know, let Brad talk about, man, I saw how you did Magnum T.A. If I get my chance, I'm going to do the same thing to you. None of that got put across, though. There was no build up to it. It just boom, you know, there he goes. So, you know, there was no acceptance by the fans, which was not Brad's fault.
No.
Totally from a booking standpoint, it was just poorly handled.
It was poorly handled, and it was never Brad Armstrong's fault. So now he doesn't draw money. The people go, he's not over. They're booing him in some places. They were booing him. You know, so it never. But they, instead of blaming themselves, the booking and Bill Watts blamed himself for that. They blamed Brad Armstrong, and it was never his fault. If they would have done a build-up, and then instead of trying to build him after that, they were trying to compare him with Magnum T.A. Now, Let's talk about Bill Watts for just a second. I respect Bill Watts. He has done a lot in the wrestling business. But instead of creating after 1984, he started want to recreate in 1984 and 85. Instead of Junkyard Dog, which had been there since 1978, by then it was 1984. And you know it, Rodney, that Bill Dundee said these words: we have to get rid of the Junkyard Dog. He said, oh, no, man, he's Drew McIntyre. He said, it doesn't matter. His time is over. His time is over. And the problem is, I cannot get another babyface over if you keep the Junkyard Dog here. Because every time somebody would get beat up, what was the chant?
Yep, JYD.
JYD, JYD, JYD. You couldn't get another babyface over. Not to the extent he needed to. Yep. So, but he had the team. They had the team. The PYT could have been the team. But you know why Bill Watts didn't want that?
Of course.
Does anybody want to guess at that?
Tell you, it's all about, again, what me and Phil talked about over and over again, was their size. They wanted big guys. And now we're midway through 1984, and now it's going to be a big, huge lurch back to 83, where it's all the big guys again. And Old Hat is on the way, and there's some of them that should have never seen the light of day in Mid-South ever again. Not to say that they're not great wrestlers. They just had no business back there. Absolutely none.
It was time for the Junkyard Dog to leave when he left. It was really time for Hacksaw Jim Duggan to be gone, because he couldn't have the matches that Bill Dundee needed them to have. But I want you to see, January, February, March, April, May, June, and July, big time business. They're drawing great money. Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Terry Taylor, Buddy Landale. They're drawing big money. And all at once, he wants to start building all the big guys again. Now, the biggest 6 months he ever had, and that's when he drew his most money in that 6 months in 1984, was with the Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express and Magnum T.A. Wrestling 2 against the Midnight Express.
Exactly.
Midnight Express would have never got over there if it wasn't for Wrestling 2.
You're exactly right.
Wrestling 2, that was the establishment, and he helped all the people get over.
And just an example, if they would have done the same thing to Josh Stroud and Mike Jackson, it would not have had the same response as it did. No. I'm just the way. I'm not trying to criticize them. I'm just saying, you see what I'm talking about. Or even at that point, even Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner.
But Jack, am I way off base to say that by bringing the Midnight Express in, putting them with Wrestling 2, that really sealed them as being, and doing the nasty stuff they did that not seal them to be able to make big money with the Rock and Roll Express?
Oh, yeah, certainly it did. And, I was talking to Robert here not too long ago about how, Watts didn't want them, but took them. And he said he just rolled the dice with them, and they started getting over so big. But he said it was the same thing. They just felt like always that their time was limited because it was eventually, he wanted to go back to bigger guys.
And that was his downfall. Yeah. Now, listen, he didn't want the Rock and Roll Express, but then he does something stupid with Al Perez and Wendell Cooley. Wendell Cooley was getting over at Mid-South Wrestling. I remember coming back from a town, and I said, you need to push Wendell Cooley. I remember telling Dad, you need to push Wendell Cooley. He is the guy to push in Mid-South Wrestling. He is over. Al Perez a little bit, but Wendell Cooley really was. It wasn't 3 weeks later, they become the Rock and Roll Express #2, Al Perez and Wendell Cooley.
And you know what? Let's just be honest. The fabulous ones of Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert, they got over real good in Memphis.
Well, I'm not for sure.
Learned that lesson.
I'm not for sure they got over better than the newly found Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah, that didn't work out at all. That
But
did not work
but
out.
he tried. This goes back to the recreating. He tried
Yeah.
to recreate instead of create someone. If you would have took Wendell Cooley, you would have played that music. He would have went and had a program with somebody. Wendell Cooley would have drew a lot of money for him. I remember the time. I remember this word saying I were talking about how well Wendell Cooley would get over. Was driving to a town, and so we were, after they did the Rock and Roll Express thing. After they did that, we were driving back from a town, and I said, might as well just go ahead and get rid of Wendell Cooley. Dad said, you just said he would draw a bunch of money. I said, yeah, as Wildcat Wendell Cooley, the cowboy with the chaps and the Heaven Ain't a Lot Like Dixie come to the ring. But he's not going to draw that way. Now he's just a joke. Made no sense. The whole thing made no sense.
And then at this point, remember, after the Junkyard Dog, it is a desperate push to try to find Junkyard Dog number 2.
Jack, did you ever get to see the Snowman?
Yeah. Yes, I did, and he needed a snow plow behind him.
Man.
You know, look, Brickhouse Brown was great.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're trying to recreate the Junkyard Dog, that's just not going to happen. As I've said before, some things are a once in a lifetime thing. That was it.
Now, who was the first guy? There was the first guy. I can't remember.
His name was George Wells. This is who Butch Reed wanted to work with, and this was which we'll cover later. But Master G, George Wells, comes in the ring unannounced, and he's in his street clothes. And the announcers, I think it was Watts. That was Bill Watson. Boy, I don't know who this is in the ring. What's he doing in the ring? Like Watts would let just anybody walk into his arena and jump in his ring without jumping on him and beat them up. I just thought, what a bunch of nonsense.
But, you ask, Brad Armstrong, after that, we tried so many ways. At the time, there was a booking committee, and I tried to find the actual booking committee sheet, and it told exactly who was in it. I think Dutch Mantell was in it. And when it came on in 1985, Dutch Mantell, Bill Dundee, Grizzly Smith, Dad, and somebody else. I'm not for sure who the other person was, but probably Bill Watts. And I can remember him saying, come ready for ideals. And evidently, they just picked the wrong ones during that book.
We had more than one rejected on the spot.
We tried to say, okay, now you're saying Brad Armstrong didn't get over, he needs to be turned heel. And we came up with a whole deal where he would say, I don't have time for you. I don't have time for you. And I certainly don't have time for those fans that turn their backs on me. And we wanted him to be turned heel at the time because they didn't think that he was going to be the big baby face. And we felt like if you built him enough and got that Russian leg sweep over, when he hit that thing on people, that if they would have took 6 to 8 weeks to build that thing, 6 to 8 weeks with a program and winning the Mid-South TV title, and then going after the North American title, he would have got over and gave him some videos. I mean, you gave him the Magnum T.A. You did videos on the Fantastics. You did videos on the Rock and Roll Express, even when they came back, but you did not do one video on Brad Armstrong. So Bill Watts, Bill Dundee, or anyone else that was booking at the time, that was your fault, not Brad Armstrong's fault. And, I don't mean to hurt your feelings. I don't mean to be mean, but that is the truth.
Well, it is. And that's absolutely truth. I mean, anybody, think about it. How long do you think it took the Junkyard Dog to do the thump before people got onto that? Look how long they'd taken with Terry Taylor and doing the flying forearm. Look how long it took. Look how long it took him with the double drop kick. What? Did we ever establish what it was in the Mid-South? No.
Now,
except for choking a person out with the rope.
I will tell you this. Brad did not care, okay? He did not care, so I don't want anybody to feel sorry for Brad Armstrong because he did not care. Because Brad was making anywhere around $1,500 to $2,000 a week working the third or fourth batches. For a while, they put him with the tag team. I think it was Terry Daniels. And he had to deal with the Dirty White Boys. He was making money. He didn't care. Never did Brad Armstrong care that he was ever on the main events he's ever pushed. He didn't care about that. It was not important to him. He wanted to wrestle as a living, and that's all he wanted to do. He didn't care if he was the star or not. Am I correct, Jack? You talked to him. You know, he would. Did he tell you that as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. He never cared about belts. He just wanted to make money and take care of himself. That's it.
Bubba Griffin in the house. Pensacola in the house. Old Tyrone Spivey said just a travesty. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. That was
we were beside ourselves when we were there. I'll just tell you right now.
Mark Dodd said that makes a lot of sense. I remember that match. Bubba Griffin asked, did Steve Armstrong always work as a tag team, or did he ever get a single push? I don't know. Did he ever get a single push?
Not that I remember.
I don't remember one.
I think he always was in tag team matches. Daniel Arvin, you dang sure want
to. Yeah. True. Absolutely. Well, it's not just that. It's just that Magnum T.A. was put through the ringer to become the North American champion.
Yeah.
Wrestling 2 put him through the ringer, and it was not an easy task. And I mean, he had to take beatings and whippings, and then he had his coach turn on him. He was put through the ringer. If you took that kind of time with Brad, or let me just say anybody, just about anybody, you're going to get the result that you want. But you take a person in there and say sink or swim in 2 weeks.
He was just done wrong.
But I can tell you this, and I'll just say this: if Brad Armstrong had went to Oklahoma University, Bill Watts would have tripped over himself to see how hard he could push it.
Yeah, if he was a football player.
That's right. His man crush on football players was absolutely obscene.
Let's all remember the name of Edgar Boo Thomas.
That'll be coming up soon.
And he used him pretty good. And he was horrible.
Awful. Brad could have worked circles around him and Steve Williams at the same time.
Would you say Bill Watts was panicking during this time, just rushing everything? What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, maybe. There was a desperate need to replace JYD and other big stars. So yeah, I can see that.
I think he made so much money in that 6. I don't understand though. He had the people. He had the pretty young things. He had the Fantastics. Man, he had so much great talent. He moved to PYT out in a month. I think they were out in a month.
Yeah.
He resented the fact that Bill Dundee came and did what he did.
Yeah,
he resented the fact that Rock and Roll Express drew the houses that they did. He resented. In fact, every time he would get a chance, he would talk about how small they are, how small the Midnight was. Now, again, I have nothing but respect for Bill Watts. Yeah. Nothing from respect for Bill Watts. In fact, if I was going to create an organization, it would be very similar to what he had. Very similar to 1984. I mean, there was no better. But this sometimes you're just blind, just totally blind. And he resented the fact that small guys came and drew houses.
Tyrone said, "Watch his ego," and he did have an ego, by the way.
Yeah, and you have to in the business.
Yeah. Daniel said, "Nail it, Rodney. Nailed it, Rodney." I think it's what he said. Mark Dodd said, "So true about football players."
I'm gonna tell you, if I may say so, and I've made mention before on this, he would talk about coaches and football on his show as if somehow they're going to be there. And Jim Ross did the same thing. And again, it's his show. It was putting the money into it. He can talk about whatever he wants to on his show. But to me, it ain't going to draw you no house. But he can talk about it.
Rodney, any closing comments before we?
One thing that I felt that shows the character of promoter in this particular organization was the fact that Wrestling 2 put how many years into his company, and in the end, he basically called him an old man after all of the work that he did. Then, after the Junkyard Dog leaves, he takes on the whole segment to a person that helped put butts in those seats year after year after year and took time out of his show to destroy the man. Verbally destroy the man. That shows gratitude. That is the gratitude of this promoter. And that shows, that says volumes of his character right there. When you will backstab people that helped you live in that big house in Bixby, Oklahoma.
And he did live in a big house, by the way. So people know he made a lot of money, made millions of dollars in 1984. And Square Circle said, but I think Watts gave us good competitive wrestling shows. Oh yeah, spectacular stuff. Bill Watts did give some great wrestling. The only thing that Bill Watts did was instead of creating after 1984, he tried to recreate. And I think that was his downfall, because by 1986, business was really, really, really bad. And in 1985, when we went down to the Universal Wrestling Federation from Continental Championship Wrestling, I remember sitting and telling Michael Hayes what happened to Mid-South Wrestling. What happened? Because the shows were boring. The house shows, at least, were boring. The televisions were still great. Ken Mantell was doing a great job. We are not saying that Mid-South Wrestling, what we were trying to say tonight was that Brett Armstrong could have got over and could have drew money, and we don't want a promoter or anyone to say, well, it was Brett Armstrong that didn't make it work. It was the promoter and the booker who didn't make it work. He could have done it. He drew money when he first started with his dad. You know why? Because Brett understood his role. When he was teaming with Bob Armstrong at 18 years old, he understood his role. He understood when he went to Atlanta and he was teaming with Georgia Championship Wrestling, and one of the youngest national tag team champions, Georgia tag team champions of all time. He understood his role. He knew Bob Armstrong was the butt-kicking person and the guy that was going to talk and was going to do the rap, while he was going to say, yes, sir, Mr. So. He knew that. That was his role. He went to Atlanta. He stayed there. He became the national heavyweight champion, and then he knew his role. He knew what it was going to take to get him there. And when he was in Mid-South Wrestling, he understood the wrestling business, and he knew his role. And he understood it very quickly after a month he was there, and then he went with it. He knew his role. But I'm going to tell you, the matches that he had were spectacular matches. We were there. We witnessed them. They were great. Mid-South Wrestling, great wrestler and organization. The Junkyard Dog, no wrestler ever in that area drew as much money as the Junkyard Dog. None. I don't care who they are. Jim Duggan was over and drew a lot of money, not the money Junkyard Dog drew.